happy to have everyone here with us for our YI Love YIDDISHFEST Hanukkah edition. Today we have something very special that we're offering. We have the great Yael Strom with us. He's not only a violinist, a composer, a filmmaker, a photographer, a playwright, he's also a writer, and he's written a brand new children's book, which he's going to share with us. So without any further ado, I am going to turn this over to Yael, and we are going to hear a really remarkable story. Again, we're very happy to have you with us, and welcome, Yael.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. I thank Avi, who's off somewhere else doing another activity, Avi Hoffman, the creator of this wonderful, wonderful festival. And thank you for those who come to listen and those who celebrate Hanukkah, a Freilich Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah on this fourth night. And those who might be listening via Facebook, if you have a question or a comment, don't be shy. Write those in the comments, and Amy will give them to let me know, and we can have a little conversation afterwards. So without further ado, here is a book, a story based upon some actual ethnographic research I did in Romania in the 1980s. So a little snippet from a Holocaust survivor stuck in my head, and then thus became this Hanukkah book called Shloyml-Boyml and his Lucky Dreidel. Shloyml, the Yiddish version of Solomon, or Shloime, as you know. Boyml means oil, so Solomon oil and his Lucky Dreidel. Shloyml, the klezmer, lived in the small Romanian town of Bahush. Shloyml played the trombone, and his klezmer band was the best in the region. But during the winter months, there was little call for music, so Shloyml worked in his Uncle Bishka's grocery store. Picture, please. And this is how the townspeople of Bahush gave Shloyml his nickname, Shloyml-Boyml, Solomon Oil. Every year, exactly 1 week before Hanukkah, Shloyml would travel to the open-air market in Constanza, a city on the Black Sea that imported food and other items arriving from distant cities bordering the Mediterranean. 1 week before Hanukkah every year, Shloyml would buy oil, not just any oil. This oil came from olives that were grown and pressed in the land of Israel. It was only at Uncle Bishka's grocery store that one could buy this special olive oil, used by all of the Jews in Bahush and nearby villages, not just for lighting their Chanukiahs each night of the festive holiday, but for cooking latkes. Each year, the townspeople held a latke contest. The contest was always held the first night of Hanukkah, in honor of the town's beloved first Hasidic leader, Rabbi Yitzchak Friedman, he of blessed memory, who was born many years ago on the first day of Hanukkah. The winner of the latke making contest was awarded a silver frying pan and got to display it in her home until the following Hanukkah. This silver frying pan had been given to the town by the rabbi himself. The latke contest of Bahush became so famous that people would come from other nearby towns, villages to compete. But no one could ever best the latkes of Bahush. And while some of the townspeople, especially Mrs. Bulbus and Mrs. Smetana, the best latke makers in town, swore it was because they had the best cooks. Everyone knew it was because they used the best oil. Now you see why Shloyml had such an important job. Without that special olive oil from the land of Israel, the town of Bahush would not only have been unable to celebrate Hanukkah, they might lose the silver frying pan to someone from another town. As it so happened, Saturday night, before he was due to leave for Constanza, Shloyml was helping his Uncle Bishka clean the store and make room for the provisions he would bring back with him. Just then, in walked some surprise visitors, the dreaded Nebbish brothers. Nebbish brothers, Motka, Botka, Zlotka, were from Yash, a city north of Bahush. They too were klezmer musicians. Their father was a wealthy grain merchant, so they did not need to support themselves other than just playing klezmer. Even though the Nebbish brothers' klezmer band was not nearly as good as Shloyml's, they were competition for him. The Nebbish brothers would perform for half of what Shloyml charged. Consequently, they were often hired instead of Shloyml's band. However, rabbis in the region only hired Shloyml's band for all their family celebrations. Weddings paid very well and gave musicians much honor. The Nebbish brothers had a wealthy father, and though they never had to work in the shop during the slow winter months, they were jealous of Shloyml. So what were they doing here in Uncle Bishka's store, Shloyml wondered. Next illustration. Shalom Aleichem, Shloyml, says Zlotka. Aleichem Shalom to you and your brothers, Zlotka. What brings you to Pahush? Answers Shloyml. Oh, we just came from playing a very important concert in a village nearby, which Shloyml guessed was not true. And we thought we might buy some olive oil for our Hanukkah celebration in Yash, said Motka, as he gave a nasty leer, accentuated by the big gaps between his front teeth. Keep in mind that Shloyml did not entirely trust the Nebbish brothers, but he would never be rude to anyone, particularly in his uncle's store. I'm sorry we don't have the oil yet, but it is just so happens I'm traveling to Costanza to buy several barrels. If you like, I'll get some extra for you. Come back in 5 days and I'll have it. Or I can even send someone to bring it to you in Yash, so you have it by the first night of Hanukkah, replied Shloyml. Zlotka winked at Motka, who winked at Botka, and said, oh, that's okay, Shloyml. We have to be going. See you at the latke contest. Nebbish brothers scurried out of the store. Next morning was bitterly cold, with heavy winds and snow falling. Shloyml got up early to prepare for the trip. His family tried to discourage him from going. They were afraid the journey would be too difficult, but Shloyml would not listen to them. The townspeople of Pahush were depending on Shloyml to bring back the special olive oil. Shloyml put his long underwear on under his warmest clothing and set off. His journey took him by ferry down the Siritel River, which fed into the mighty Danube, which finally emptied into the Black Sea. Shloyml sat shivering in a corner of the deck, partially protected from the wind by several big cargo trunks. He tried, next picture please, he tried to forget the frigid air that stung his face and ears by humming Yiddish folk songs and thinking of his family and friends back in Pahush as they prepared for Hanukkah and the Latke festival. Back in Pahush at that very moment, the rabbi and the congregants were cleaning the synagogue and decorating the walls in the social hall with paper cutouts, all in preparation for the latke contest and party. Others in the town were polishing their chanukias and picking out the best potatoes and onions from their root cellars for their latkes. These happy thoughts warmed Shloyml as he watched the scenery go by while the ferry made its way down the Danube. Usually, the trip down the Danube took only half a day. The ferry would arrive in Costanza early in the evening, but the large ice floes in the river impeded the ferry. So it took a full day before Shloyml's ferry arrived late at night in Costanza. In previous years, before buying the olive oil, Shloyml would spend time browsing through the market, marveling at all the exotic foods, spices, and clothing that originated from places with names like Athens, Alexandria, and Aleppo. This time, because of the delay, he had only enough time for a meal and maybe a nap. Shloyml hurried to a cafe. It was very busy, full of happy noises. Shloyml met some other klezmers, some who had just arrived from Constantinople and others from as far as Vienna, Budapest, and Krakow, on their way to Constantinople. It wasn't long before they were happily exchanging stories and Yiddish songs, all the while enjoying delicious cups of strong Turkish coffee. The coffee would help Shloyml stay awake until they had to be at the oil merchant store in a few short hours at 4 a.m. Even with the delay, he would still be able to purchase the oil in time to be on the next ferry home at 8 a.m., just one day late. However, Shloyml was having such a good time with his fellow klezmers, he lost track of the time. It was only as he glanced out the window and saw the sky lightening to the east that he realized it was almost dawn. He asked the time and learned it was already 6 a.m., just 2 hours until the ferry was leaving, and he hadn't yet bought the oil. But he knew if he hurried, he could still get the oil, get on the ferry, and make it home before Hanukkah began. Shloyml ran all the way to the market, which was already filled with hundreds of early morning customers and traders, all looking for the best buys and food items before everything was picked over. He weaved his way through the crowded maze of stalls until he found Mr. Abulafia, who sold the special olive oil from Israel. Mr. Abulafia, an old friend of Shloyml's, was originally from Constantinople. When Shloyml ran up to his shop panting, Mr. Abulafia was surprised. Reb Shloyml, what are you doing here? Asked Mr. Abulafia. Next picture, please. Shalom Aleichem, Mr. Abulafia. Good to see you. I would like to get my usual 8 drums of oil, please, says Shloyml, panting. But, oi, Reb Shloyml, I don't have any oil. What? No oil? How is this possible? Shloimel felt like he would faint. Shloimel, I'm so sorry. At 4:30 a.m. this morning, just after I opened my shop, 3 men came in and asked to buy all of my oil. I could not believe it. I told them I was saving it for my friend Shloimel. But they said, you could not come yourself this year and had sent them to pick up the oil for you. So I sold them all the oil. Shloimel could hardly believe his ears. Seeing his friend looking so upset, Mr. Abulafia said, please don't worry, Shloimel. Next week, I will have a new shipment of oil from Israel. Next week? Hanukkah will be half over by then. Shloimel slowly walked away, feeling depressed. How could he disappoint the whole Jewish community of Pehush? He walked blindly, eventually coming to the sandy beach, sinking to his knees. Staring blankly out at the Black Sea, he thought to himself he was going home without the special olive oil from Israel for the first time in 20 years. And for the first time in 20 years, there would be no latke baking contest, no special oil for the townspeople to light their Hanukkahs. The celebration of Rabbi Yitzhak Friedman's birthday would be ruined. And as if that weren't bad enough, someone from a different town would leave with the silver frying pan, all because he did not get to Mr. Abulafia's in time. What would he say to everyone, especially to the rabbi? Shloimel sighed deeply, and as he did so, he felt something digging into his knee. It poked him through his heavy layers of clothing. He shifted his knee to the side and reached down into the sand, thinking it was a stone. But instead, he was surprised to find a plain little wooden dreidel in his fingers. What was a dreidel doing there on the beach in Constanza? Almost shrugged, put it in his pocket, and began walking aimlessly as the next ferry did not leave for a couple more hours. Back in Pehush, the townspeople were getting worried when Shloimel did not return. He didn't know how long the trip to Constanza had taken. Shloimel should have arrived that very day on the ferry. He had never been late before. Could something have happened to him? Did he get caught in a storm? Did the ferry sink? Maybe some thieves had stolen his money, or even worse, the olive oil. The townspeople crowded into Uncle Bishka's store, each shouting out questions. But even though Uncle Bishka was also worried about Shloimel, he calmed them by saying, don't worry. All these years of playing at weddings, Shloimel never kept the bride waiting. He'll soon be home. Meanwhile, back in Constanza, Shloimel approached a cafe where he heard a familiar style of klezmer music coming from inside. He hurried and pushed himself through the crowd. Sure enough, who was playing? None other. Next picture, please. And the Nebbish brothers, Mutka on his violin, Butka on the bass, and Zlotka on the kobza. And their instruments cases rested on the 8 barrels of olive oil. When Shloimel saw this, he burned with anger. Mutka saw Shloimel and winked at his brothers. Since when did you start coming to Constanza to buy olive oil from Israel, said Shloimel. Why can't we celebrate Hanukkah with something special like you do in Pehush, sneered Zlotka. Shloimel, why didn't you bring your trombone so you could join us, laughed Butka. How could I improve on all that harmonious scratching and screeching sounds you already are making, replied Shloimel, as he slowly turned to leave. Face it, Shloimel, we won and you lost, crowed Mutka. Just then, Shloimel felt the little wooden dreidel in his pocket. This gave him an idea. Shloimel knew the Nebbish brothers were so competitive that if he challenged them to a game of dreidel, they would have no choice but to play. Just maybe he could win even a little of the precious oil to bring back home. Okay, Nebbish brothers, enough caterwauling. I have a proposition for you. I challenge you to 12 spins of the dreidel. If I win the majority of the games, then I get to take one of those barrels of olive oil back home with me. If it is a tie or I lose, then you may join my band when we play for the mayor's daughter's wedding in 2 weeks. What do you say? Are you sure you want to make such a deal, said Butka. Shloiml nodded yes. And we would get to lead the bride and groom to the chuppah, asked Lotka. Shloiml nodded yes again. And we get to play the special mitzvah dance for the bride, said Mutka. Shloiml nodded yes once more. Shloiml put the dreidel down on the table, began stretching and pulling his fingers and cracking his knuckles. Now remember, the amounts of points for each letter is as follows. Nun is 0, Gimel is 4, Hey is 2, and Shin is -2. And each of you get 4 spins while I get 12, said Shloiml. Enough talking, let's play, said Botka. Botka and Shloiml each took 4 spins, with Shloiml winning round 1. Fortunately, in round 2, Shloiml lost to Zlotka 16-0. Now it was round 3, and Shloiml had to beat Botka. If not, he was going home with no olive oil, and the Nebbish brothers were going to play with his band at the mayor's wedding. The pressure was on Shloiml. The cafe was so quiet, you could hear only the sound of the waves slapping up against the dock. Even though it was a bit chilly in the room, Shloiml wiped the sweat from his forehead. He took off his jacket, picked up the dreidel, leaned forward, carefully lifted his hand 7 inches above the table, and gave the dreidel a mighty twist. The dreidel dropped and spun so quickly that it weaved in straight lines back and forth across the table until it wobbled and fell. It's a nun, shouted Botka. That's 0 for you, Shloiml. Ha ha, laughed Botka. The wedding party is ours, shouted Zlotka. Next picture, please. Shloiml just lifted his eyebrows at Mutka and waited for him to spin the dreidel. Mutka gave it a mighty twist, and it too seemed to spin forever, until the dreidel stopped. It's a gimel, shouted Zlotka. Shloiml took the dreidel and this time held it 9 inches above the table. He gave it an even mightier twist and waited anxiously for it to stop spinning. It landed on nun again. Before any of the Nebbish brothers could say anything, Shloiml muttered, I know, it's another 0. Mutka spun the dreidel and got another gimel. Now it was 8 points for Mutka and 0 for Shloiml. On the third spin, Shloiml got a gimel, Mutka's shin, which now made the score 6-4 in favor of Mutka. Now it was Shloiml's very last spin. Shloiml shrugged his shoulders, twisted his neck to loosen up the muscles, and took a deep breath, holding it for a few seconds before exhaling. Shloiml thought about the people of Bahush, who he knew were waiting anxiously for him. He took the dreidel and for the first time held it only 2 inches above the table. Next picture, please. He gave it such a tremendous spin that after it dropped onto the table, it seemed to take forever before it came to rest. It landed on hay. Now the score was tied 6-6. I win even if we are tied after the spin, chuckled Mutka. Yes, yes, now spin, snapped Shloiml. All Mutka had to do was either get a nun, gimel, or hay. The Nebbish brothers would be the winners. Mutka took the dreidel, whispered something encouraging to it, spun it and let it drop. It too seemed to take forever as it twisted and weaved across the table back and forth, back and forth. Then suddenly it stopped and landed on shin. This meant Shloiml had 6 and Mutka had 4. Shloiml had won 2 of the 3 rounds. The Nebbish brothers were stunned. They gave first at the dreidel, then to Shloiml, who took his dreidel, put it into his coat, pocket, and quickly took a cart and loaded the barrel of olive oil. At just enough time to pull it the docks and load it in onto the ferry that was leaving in 5 minutes. Shloiml was so exhausted from his time in Constanza and the pressure of winning that he slept the entire way to Bahush, waking as the ferry arrived late afternoon that day, just hours before Hanukkah was to begin. Shloiml pulled the cart with the barrel from the dock to Uncle Bishka's store, where the townspeople were waiting anxiously for him. But where are the rest of the barrels? His uncle asked. This is all I could get, Shloiml apologized. It's only enough for one night of latke making and lighting our Hanukkah, said Mrs. Bulbus. But the rabbi pointed out, don't worry, we'll have enough. Have faith. This isn't the first time this has happened. Next picture, please. One by one, townspeople bought their oil and hurried home to prepare the potatoes and Chanukias the first night of Hanukkah. Immediately, a wonderful aroma wafted out of many homes as the townspeople began to fry their delicious latkes. In fact, the aroma was so strong that people could smell it throughout Bahush for the entire 8 days of Hanukkah. That night, the synagogue social hall was packed with participants and onlookers from near and far for the latke making competition. There were regular potato latkes and latkes made with all kinds of other ingredients: dried mushrooms, dried apples, garlic, parsnip, even latkes made with kasha and cheese. There were heaps of fresh applesauce still warm from the pot and gobs of creamy sour cream. Everyone tasted the different latkes and washed them down with seltzer mixed with sour cherry juice. Judging began with the rabbi, butcher, and the shoemaker going from table to table, taking just a small bite of each latke, chewing and swallowing carefully, and then washing it down with a gulp of sour cherry juice. Each judge then wrote something on a piece of paper and moved on to the next contestant. Next picture, please. While the judges went from plate to plate, Shloyml and his band played lively klezmer music. After an hour of judging, Rabbi got up on a chair to announce the winner of the latke competition. Immediately, all was quiet. My fellow Jews of Bahush and elsewhere this year, as in all the years past, it was very difficult to choose a winner. You have all made such delicious latkes, but we have unanimously chosen for the best latke, Mrs. Bulbus. There was a loud cheer from the audience as Mrs. Bulbus went up to claim the silver frying pan again. Silver frying pan award. Then the rabbi quieted everyone down. Before we say the blessings over the lighting of our Chanukias with the special olive oil from the land of Israel, we must give heartfelt thanks to Shloyml-Boyml, who had to undertake a difficult journey and overcome many hardships. Next picture, please. His efforts once again have helped us keep the traditions here in Bahush of celebrating Rabbi Yitzchak Friedman's birthday in our very special way on this first night of Hanukkah. Mazel tov, and thank you, Shloyml-Boyml. While everyone was cheering for Shloyml, he stuck his hand into his coat pocket, pulled out his lucky dreidel. Smiling to himself, he thought maybe one day he would tell the townspeople how his dreidel helped perform a miracle, just like the miracle of the Hanukkah oil during the ancient time of the Maccabees. Then Shloyml, with his family, recited the blessings over the lighting of the Chanukiah, ate some latkes, and joined his band to play more music. And do you, dear reader, think the oil lasted all 8 days of Hanukkah? And if you can see that last illustration, folks, that was pulled down, I took the classic Yiddish song Bulbus, which goes like something like Zin, Dick Bulbus, one Dick Bulbus, Dienstag und Mittwoch Bulbus, Donnerstag und Freitag Bulbus, Shabbos in an oven Bulbus, Kigla Sonntag weiter Bulbus. It's about eating potatoes, poor man's food every day of the week, but Shabbos, you can't just have boiled potatoes, you have potato cocoa. So here's Sunday latkes, Monday latkes, Tuesday, Wednesday, but Shabbos latkes with sour cream. And then what do we have? Mushrooms with latkes and cabbage, lunch and dinner, more and more. But Shabbos, we have latkes with a little whiskey. Then onions with latkes and garlic, fried and grated latkes. Again, more latkes. And then after davening on Shabbos prayers, latkes with applesauce. Then finally, yesterday, latkes. Oh, tomorrow, latkes. Hanukkah without latkes, it's a shame, right? Hanukkah's a shame without them. As we light the Hanukkah candles, my belly is bursting. Give me no more latkes. And if you're interested in that song, everyone, that song is on my recent Hanukkah CD called Shimmering Lights, which is Hanukkah songs from Ladino culture, Sephardic cultures, East European Yiddish cultures in Yiddish and in Hebrew, and even some in English. So without further ado, maybe out there in Facebook land, if you're watching that way, you have a question or two. And if not, then I will play a couple Romanian Jewish melodies. How's that before we say goodbye to each other? I think Amy, I think she posted the link. So if you're interested in getting this storybook, support authors like us and small publishing houses. This is a wonderful publishing house called Text Verlag. It's out of Lund, Sweden. Started about 10 years ago by the lovely Jewish couple there, named the family is Oliansky and Nikki, his wonderful wife. And they actually published this early spring the first Yiddish version of Harry Potter, and it did very well. Many people around the world bought the first editions. It's still available. And so what it's great is he is promoting Yiddish culture, because to promote Yiddish culture, one can't just rest on only the old, folks, right? That's beautiful, the old, and to extol the old, but also to push and create new art forms in Yiddish culture. So that's why I am doing new klezmer tunes and new Yiddish songs like latkes and Yiddish stories like Shloyml-Boyml. And it's in English and it's in Yiddish. You can read it, the same book, left to right and right to left. So was there any questions, Amy? If not, I'll get the fiddle and I'll get it ready anyhow.
Yes, no, I don't see many questions, but I have one.
I'm listening.
It's your first children's book that you've written?
Actually, no. Thank you for asking. This is my second children's illustrated book. My first one is based upon also Yiddish folklore superstition. It's called The Wedding That Saved a Town. And that's about when, very appropriate for this very strange year we're having with the pandemic. It's about the cholera epidemics that would happen in Eastern Europe, and it would strike all people, Gentile, Jewish, alike, whatever. And the rabbis would, say, the Jews would go to the rabbi and say, "Rabbi, you got to help us. What can we do?" "Well, wash your hands better." They would put lime in the street. Let's read Tehillim, Psalms. Finally, if nothing happened, they would hold a Jewish wedding in a cemetery, which is known in Yiddish as a Schwarze Chasana. It was a black wedding, and they would bring two orphans, because who are the loneliest people in the eyes of God are orphans who don't have parents. And they would bring two eligible orphans of marriageable age together and marry them, thinking that then Hashem, God, would his countenance and say, "Okay, no more pandemic." And then so there'd be klezmer musicians playing klezmer in a cemetery.
I do have one question from a nice lady named Jane. Jane would like to know what you consider the age range for the book.
I would say you could read it. I would say, I'm bending down because I'm getting my violin out. I would say anywhere from 5 to 11, because it's not just 6. I would say 11-year-old, read it on their own. There's some good vocabulary there. And so, yeah, I would say, you could read it to a 4-year-old, but 5 to 11, I'd say. I would say kindergarten to what, 3rd, 4th grade? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. It was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I love the illustrations.
Yeah, no. Oh, and I'll let me just bend.
I'll wait till you get your violin.
Yeah. Actually, the illustrations. I'm just getting. Okay, so the illustrations, everybody. Wonderful Emir, singer Führer. He's a friend of mine from Budapest. I met while traveling and doing my research. Jewish gentleman, and he's done the covers of my couple of my CDs as well, Borscht with Bread Brothers, and one called The Devil's Bride. So yeah, they're different. Not your typical, which I like. They stretch the. That's it. He exactly. Well, he's very Kabbalistic in his work. You saw the Nun Gimel Haitian. Real quick, people, if you're listening. So Nun Gimel Haitian, we know that, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, and a great miracle happened there. Of course, if you're in Israel, you say Nes Gadol Haya Po, and a great miracle happened here. But in Yiddish, Nun means nish, nothing, if you're playing Dreidel. Gimel means ganz, means you get everything. Gimel, hey means hal, means half, that you get half of the pot, whatever that is. And shin means shtel, means to put in. So you don't want to get that too often or you lose. So that's how that game is played. So here we go. Let me see. Okay. A little Romanish. All right. And let's see. How about one more here? Let me think of. This is actually a melody, a niggin that I learned in the town of. I want to say Bahush. Now I think about it. Wow. But it's kind of known in many places, so you might recognize it. It goes. Let's see. Let's see. Let's, I think. All right. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that.
Certainly did. We had one more question that I'll give you before we go.
Oh, sure.
Yes, one of our viewers asked how children have been reacting to the book thus far.
Well, it's only been out for a couple of weeks. So what I've heard good things. That's I've heard. And because it's a different story, and I think also kids like the idea of of the what I heard is they like that the whole, like, is he gonna win? No, he's gonna lose. Oh, he's bad spin. They like the competition, and also kind of the funny names. When I named the brothers, those who know Yiddish out there, the Nebbish brothers, Nebbish,
It's funny.
not funny, and then Zlotka, Botka, Mutka, just to make fun of the sounds. So the one part that when I was in a town called Pietronemsk, which is in that region of Romania, north eastern region. People, if you want to know where this takes place, it's in the province of Moldavia, which is a province, like a state in northeastern Romania. The capital being Iași, and we mentioned that in this, and a small town south is Bohuș. So I had heard, a man had told me about, I was learning some Yiddish tunes, and he was explaining to me, he said, oh, there was this klezmer musician, and he would travel throughout, and when he would travel to Constanza, which is on the Black Sea, he would meet other musicians and from different parts, because port cities, people are coming in and out, and there's trade. And also talking about some of the delicious foods that normally you wouldn't find in the interior of the country unless you were brought there. And so that got me thinking about this whole aspect of the cultures, because I don't know, folks, if you're listening, but there's an aspect of that Sephardic culture, right? Because Mr. Abulafia, Constantinople, and Romania is interesting. Romania is a very East European Ashkenaz. Yiddish theater comes from Romania, Yiddish musical theater, but you also had Sephardic Jewry is there too. And so I kind of wanted to bring that together. So I think it's unique. So I think it's great for families and kids, the book, because you learn about some real history and aspects of Yiddish culture that it's not quite as well known as perhaps other parts. So yeah, and it's a small publisher, so you're supporting them, and you're supporting me to be able to do more books. I have many more stories I want to write, because I have many more oral histories, interviews that I have, lots of information. And I'll just say, before I say goodbye to you, if you want more information on me, folks, my name is Yael Strom, YALESTROM, website yaelstrom.com. And you can read about my books and films and exhibitions, etc. So I wish you a freilichen Hanukkah Sameach, a freilichen Hanukkah, a latke dicke Hanukkah. If you haven't had your latkes yet, you still have 4 more days to cook some latkes, fry latkes.
Yael, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna bid you goodbye, and thank you for both your wonderful concert that we had and for adding in a little violin today.
Yes, no, thank you, and thank you, Amy. Thank you to Avi. And we'll look forward to doing more things together. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
More things together in the future.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And for everybody who's still online, in case you're not sure who I am, I'm Amy London. I'm the Executive Producing Director at Yiddishkeit Initiative, and I'm very happy to have spent this hour or almost hour with you as we explored this terrific children's book. I'm drinking from my YI mug, which you too can purchase, along with a lot of other merchandise that we've got. Just go on our website at yilovejewish.org and check out all the different tote bags and books and mugs and shirts, all kinds of great stuff, including my favorite mug that says schmoozing. So anyway, coming up this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we have a Hanukkah fireside chat with Yid Life Crisis, which will be awfully terrific. They're a really funny duo from Montreal. And I know if you haven't seen them before, you are in for a very big treat. And if you've seen them before, you're not going to want to miss this one, because this is all about Hanukkah. And then this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we have another performance of Schmoozing with Avi, with a very special interview with my dear friend Tova Feldshuh. So don't miss a minute at the YI Love Jewish, actually Yiddish, Why I Love Yiddish Fest Hanukkah edition. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you in a little bit.